Hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my overview of Synergy. So if you're not across it, I do overviews on this channel. I just have a look at the first 2 hours of a game. It's the Steam refund window. It's a little bit different in this case because we covered this in early access. I was very impressed. I've dipped back in at the 1.0 build now, which should be available now by the time this video goes up. So I've put yet another 2 hours in, but a little bit of it is retreading old ground. But suffice to say, I still think Synergy is really cool and really interesting. And if you're an enthusiast in the space of narrative colony builders that will test you a bit, think Frostpunk, think Ixion, probably my 2 favorite go-tos. This is definitely up there, and I would highly recommend checking it out. Right off the bat, I want to talk about the art style and direction, and it ties in with this whole world that they've built. Like, technically your dude's a human, but I mean, the art style is something else. This Technicolor yet pastel palette, so imaginative and inventive, and it reminds me of Tintin. If you told me that the artist that did Tintin is doing this and yet it has nothing to do with Tintin, I would believe you. But I'm just really quite captured by the art in general. And at its core, you're playing as tribes. There's a couple of different scenarios. The tutorial goes on for like an hour, but it's still a pretty good self-contained scenario. And once it's completed, your dudes go off into the wilderness to start the next scenario. So it's something you don't want to skip because the game's doing actually some very unusual stuff, and even with the tutorial you might not fully grasp it because there is an experimentation component to the longer thread. But at its core, think post-apocalypse, wasteland, that sort of thing, but more wholesome. It's not like there's roaming bandits or anything, at least not in the early going. But you guys have a big focus. There's a big introspective hook to your tribe's mentality. The first layer is we need to survive. All the water's like toxic. We need to filter it. We need to come up with ways to survive. That's fair enough. That makes sense. But the next step is the fact that at the elder level, they seem to realize that there's lost knowledge. They have rumors within their culture that maybe we had libraries of information or whatever, but the conclusion is the same regardless of the story thread, is that it's been lost to time, all this knowledge, and that should be overcome. And also the idea of grappling with your surrounds and your environs. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but they do talk about their previous ancestors, generations, what have you, didn't really live in harmony, so much so that they understand their environment and how best to work with it without tearing it to pieces and just destroying everything. So that's sort of the dictate of your people. Dare I say, it's a bit Greenpeace-y, save the trees, but it's done in an absolutely reasonable method. That's how you get me on side with your pseudo-activism, is if you use reason. So that's a real core loop of this game, and mechanically that's how it manifests really well and is the most interesting part. So I'll brush over. At its core, you have frostpunky stuff. You've got to build houses and harvesting things, food, water, that sort of stuff. It has a whole districting system that leads into this longer tail on a tribal cultural focus, which is usually something you only really see in art styles. But the way that they explore culture, from simple stuff to just tables and chairs and in areas for people to hang out, moving up to tapestries and art and everything that lines up with the artistic layer to this game. I guess what I'm trying to do with my words is express that this doesn't go down let's say an Anno 1800 industrialized way of looking at scaling up and building a culture. This is much more of a spiritual, dare I say, tribal approach to enriching your culture and building it out. And look, it's weird, it's unusual, and it's done very, very well. Anyway, the main gameplay hook that's really interesting is the way that you interface with nature, in that, trees and harvesting, bushes, that stuff, rocky outcrops, these sort of things. So what you can do at first is you can just rip them up, right? Rip this tree up, I'll get this from it. And I don't even know if you explicitly know that until you do it. And there are some cases where it'll hurt your dudes. Maybe it's got like a prickly bush or something like that, right? And then you have to heal them, whatever. But it's ultimately entry level, it's destructive stuff. You have little teams of explorers. And again, that's the focus. It's not like a militaristic focus or even the Frostpunk overarching theme of survival at all costs. You know, do we put the kids on the tools? And it's very bleak and miserable. And I'm not criticizing it, but the theme here is that of considered exploration and technological, experimental, scientific undertaking. As I say, your people seem to have a scientific curiosity built into their ethos. And so one of the first buildings is essentially like a little testing station, and you send them out to all these different, I'm using my hands, different berry bushes and outcrops and etc., mushroom plant things, trees, and they do the basic entry-level experimentation on that. And what that will then allow you to do is learn more about the tree and the knowledge and how it works and how you can potentially harvest it. So that's one of the first things you'll do, is you'll figure out how to harvest berry bushes in a non-destructive manner. So there's a mechanical component to the, you know, harmonizing with nature. And while I've only put in early hours time, and I really want to put in more, it's pretty clear that there's synergy and interplay between different plants and different trees interacting with each other, something to do with soil composition and the general sort of environment, the climate. So then you have a research tree, you unlock all sorts of other methods of harvesting things in a potentially regenerative and non-destructive way and trying to leverage synergy between all the different moving parts of nature. I think it's really cool, it's really wild. And again, I brushed on the cultural component. It seems like a very powerful buff. There's a whole bunch of different, you know, social, cultural needs of people. They're not just machines that you send to work on the production line, but if you give them these bonuses, these overlaps, these districts that the game really starts leaning into, which that in itself I've only touched on, is a really interesting mechanic, like the idea that within a square you can mouse over the sort of town center of the district and it will say any 2 of these buildings or 3 of these buildings and you'll get X points to the level of the district as well, and there'll be multiple of those different bonuses. So it encourages this kind of flourishing through experimentation and combinations as well. I guess, you know, from the perspective of someone who loves to build in modular grids, it kind of does knock you off balance. It knocks you around and challenges you to build outside of the norm, but I like that. To me, it's another system yet to be solved. But yeah, if you give people a cultural bonus or whatever, it gives things like 5% production speed to all workers, and that'll be, as I understand it, per dude that has that bonus. So obnoxiously powerful bonuses, and that's the way you incentivize someone like me to, you know, hang tapestries and build decorative gardens, is if you create a carrot on a stick scenario and if you make it a very attractive proposition functionally, then I will engage with those mechanics. And I think that's the same for a lot of people that are attracted to these more cerebral games, right? Most people aren't playing these because they're trying to sculpt the perfect garden. They're playing it because they have a autistic craving for crunching spreadsheets and numbers. And you know, you're going out and exploring, so it does have a lot of overlap with its inspiration, things like Frostpunk, and building out a bit of a story. I don't really know how much of a story there is other than the kind of primal, the people going out there and trying to rediscover their tribe. But what's there is interesting enough. Like I said, there's a marrying of an art style that actually ties into the mechanics as well, which is kind of unusual. Aesthetic does not necessarily lend itself to mechanic. And so there's a little bit of exploring and walls of text and dealing with expeditions going out and crisis resolution, and that's enough. It seems to have a creeping climate issue as well, like the temperatures are getting more harsh and going up, so an inverse of Frostpunk, but the same sort of idea. But I think all in all, I've covered off on it enough. It's a curiosity, and it's too early in my time spent with it to tell if it will swing with something as great as Frostpunk and Ixion. But if you were to say it was like, let's say, a third place to those two, that's in no way a disparagement. That's a strong compliment. So all in all, yeah, it's doing its own thing originally, and it seems to be doing it really well. And if you find those sort of games that I've mentioned previously to be your cup of tea, then it'd be a bit of a no-brainer to at least put it on your wish list, maybe check it out. All right, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.